everyone, I'm back with another really exciting video today. This has been highly anticipated by quite a few people among my friends and also the Tamagotchi community, and I believe there aren't many videos like this out there. I will be showing you how I customized this yellow Tamagotchi V3 into a chocobo, the yellow bird from Final Fantasy. I love Final Fantasy so much. I'm such a huge fan. So first things first, of course, we gotta take the Tamagotchi apart. So I took my handy Japanese GIS screwdrivers to do that. And of course the battery cover comes off first, and then the 4 smaller screws holding the 2 halves of the Tamagotchi together. And for this, I used the 00 size screwdriver. That last screw was really stubborn and just wouldn't come out, so I had to take out my other screwdriver set, which is a little more heavyweight and sturdier, and I was finally able to take it out. So here's the inside of the Tamagotchi just in case you haven't seen it before. The round metal plate with the wires is actually the Tamagotchi speaker, and that needs to be taken apart from the Tamagotchi shell, and the 4 screws holding the board to the front of the Tama needs to be removed as well. In order to do that, I'm taking a pair of my handy dandy pointy pliers to pull off the plastic, and also taking my X-Acto knife to cut off the glue and pry the speaker out of place. I'm using the same pliers to gently pull the metal ring with the keychain so that I can finally separate the 2 halves completely. After I take the 4 screws out, I can take out the circuit board and speaker along with the reset button and internal screen and background. Then the last couple pieces that are left are the outer screen, which is just a simple piece of plastic, and then the silicone buttons, which you can easily just pull out. And after all the parts are separated, it's time to sand. I use medium 120 grit sandpaper. Something like 200 is too soft and smooth, and 80 is too harsh. So I like to use this, which is in between. I also use isopropyl alcohol to remove the leftover dust, and rinsing it with water helps too. So now I'm kneading some white polymer clay. I like to paint over the clay pieces after they're baked, so I rarely use color clay. Color clay is more expensive and comes in less quantity anyway, so white polymer clay works well for me. And here I'm just quickly taking off the screw that's attached to the battery cover. All Tamagotchi connections have a little plastic ring around the screw to make it stay in the hole when you remove and place the cover. And now I'm back to clay again, and I decided to start on the beak first. Then I started to do the 3 feathers on the head. And it's already looking really cute. And then I start working on the wings, which actually took me quite a while, but of course you don't feel that because this is sped up like 50 times. I don't really use that many tools to sculpt. I pretty much just use my fingers for the most part, and you can see that I'm using my nails when I need to make a smooth surface. Gotta make do with what you have, right? Then I started on the part that took the longest to make, the talons. It took a lot of trial and error. I had to keep adding more and more and more clay to create a shape that I was finally happy with. Now I'm making the tail feathers, which will be attached to the battery cover, and I had to create a hole so I could access the screw after I glue these together. I created a rough circle for the tail, and I used my X-Acto knife to roughly cut where I want each feather to be, and I used my fingers to pinch, smooth, and shape them. And I also had to cut out a part at the bottom so I don't cover the reset button. So here's all the clay pieces in the oven. This is Sculpey polymer clay, so it needs to be set to around 275 degrees Fahrenheit, and every 1/4 inch needs to be baked for around 30 minutes. My pieces are pretty small, so I set them for around 18 minutes, and I also let them sit in the oven for a bit while it cooled down, so it was fine. And of course, safety first, wear a mask when you're working with this stuff because there may be fumes and dust. Sculpey is hot out of the oven, so make sure you let it cool down enough before you handle it with your hand. So I also sanded the rear half of the Tama, but I don't have the footage here because I was out of frame when I did it, so whoops. And I'm taking the sticker off the battery cover so I can sand that too. And I'm using the same 120 grit sandpaper from earlier. Now I have gloves on for this and also a mask on my face because this creates a lot of dust. I'm using the same sandpaper, but I cut it into a smaller piece so I could sand the clay pieces and get it as smooth as possible. You'll see in the final result, there are some slightly visible imperfections, but it's not a big deal, at least for me anyway, because this is going to be in my personal collection. But side note, I do take extra care if I'm commissioned. So after sanding the clay, it's finally time to glue the pieces to the Tama. I use Gorilla Glue because a little goes a long way and it dries really quickly. When I make custom Tamas, I make sure to place the clay pieces where it is still possible to access the Tamagotchi guts, so I attach the wings to the back half of the Tamagotchi since there's more area to work with. The tail part needs to be placed correctly or else it'll throw off the whole look, so I took time to figure out where I need to glue it. And then the feet, which is the most important part because they need to help the Tama stand and also can't interfere with taking the Tamagotchi apart. Now onto the fun part, painting! Woo! I use acrylic paint because it's buildable and it dries quickly. I first primed the clay and Tamagotchi with white paint. A white base helps the colors become more vibrant, and yellow acrylic paint tends to be more translucent than other colors, so this is an important step. I did around 3 coats of white paint. And for the main color, I mixed some light yellow, golden yellow, orange, and a little bit of white. I noticed that adding a little bit of white to paint actually makes it more opaque and thicker, and I did around 3 to 4 coats of this as well. After that dried, I used orange to add shading and gradients to some parts, like on the bottom of the head feathers and in between the tail feathers and the tips of the wings to add more dimension. And of course, I had to paint the beak and the screen border as well. Then I got started on the talons. I painted them brown, but it required quite a few coats because brown tends to be more translucent. And I also shaded the claws a little bit of gray. So here's what the parts look like together after the painting process. So moving on, you can already see that I'm applying UV resin to the Tama. I allowed the paint to dry overnight before starting this step to be extra careful. The resin step was the longest because it needs a few coats to be pretty smooth, and I need at least 7 to 8 hours for each coat of this specific resin to harden without tackiness. And here's a short clip of the parts getting cured in my box under the UV light. So here are all the parts after the curing process. Resin makes the whole thing look so nice and complete, and it also does a really good job to protect it. And now it's finally time to officially put it all together. The speaker part is a little difficult, but there's no need to re-glue the speaker to the TAMA because it stays in place fine on its own. But the problem is the wires. They can snap off really easily, and it's happened to me before, which is why I always have a soldering kit just in case something unfortunate happens. I was really happy to find out that I was able to snap on the front part with no issues, and now it's the easy part. All the internal stuff is out of the way and assembling went smoothly. Sometimes I forget a small part on the inside, whether it be the IR port or reset button, but I didn't miss anything this time, thankfully. Before adding the last screw, I need to put in the plastic ring I mentioned earlier, but I lost it during the process, so I took one of my spare tamas that I have stored in my Use for Custom Tamagotchis box and took it from that instead. I could have gone without it. The Tamagotchi still runs fine without that plastic ring, but it is inconvenient when the screw pops out and falls to the floor, and I don't want to risk losing it. And voila! The completed work. And the moment of truth to see if the TAMA works or not. Sometimes a problem might arise, such as no sound, flipped screen, missing pixels, or bad button response, since I did tamper around with the inside, so it's important to check. And when I put in the battery, it made a reset egg sound, which is a good sign. So far so good. And I wanted to see what the previous owner had. I'm always curious about that stuff, so that's why I downloaded. And now to actually reset the whole device. Button response is good and everything else seems to be running fine. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Let me know if you would like to see more of these. Maybe I can turn this into a series, maybe once a month or so. And shout out to everyone who is watching this from the Tamagotchi community. Make sure you leave some feedback and also give me a like and also subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.